Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of HR Leaders Live. I'm Chris Rainey, founder and CEO here at HR Leaders, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, as always, Matt Burns, who's a former Chief HR Officer, Global Industry Analyst, and host of the Thinking Inside the Box podcast. Today, we've got an amazing guest. We're joined by Brady Pyle, who's a Vice President of HR for Space Center Houston and former Deputy Chief Human Capital Officer at NASA. Welcome everyone. How are you? Brady, nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to be here, Chris.
Yeah, so you didn't when you said you were going to move roles, you didn't go far, did you?
No, it ended up staying in Houston. That was great.
Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about your background and your journey to where we are now in the new role.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Texas, and so I went to Texas A&M University, got a master's in HR there, and then became a graduate co-op student at NASA in 1995. Spent 10 years as an HR generalist with the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, and then moved into different roles of leadership. Moved into an executive role in Houston in 2016, served in that role through 2018, and then NASA shifted its whole HR model. So HR executives used to be decentralized, report to centers. They decided to centralize the function. And so my role in 2018 became Director of HR Services, where I was responsible for leading all of the other field executives. In 2020, as you mentioned, January of 2020 to be exact, became the Deputy Chief Human Capital Officer. Didn't get a full first 90 days before pandemic hit, and life for all of us certainly changed. Served in that role the last 3 years. In February, I took an early retirement from NASA and then moved over to Space Center Houston. That's a separate nonprofit organization that's the official visitor center of the Johnson Space Center. We topped 1 million visitors last year. We're on track for about 1.3 million visitors this year. So, fun place to be.
Amazing. I love the fact that your idea of retirement is getting another job.
Right, right. Well, yeah,
You're like, I'm
still
retiring from
not
NASA and I'm going to start a new job. So,
yeah,
did you take any
not
time
quite
off?
ready for full retirement
Did
for
you take
sure.
did you take any time in between to relax and unwind a little bit?
A weekend. Yeah.
Oh wow,
Weekend.
how
Right.
generous of yourself. You gave yourself a weekend. Wow. Why am I not surprised? That's the case.
No, no,
Uh,
Chris. But once I had announced kind of my intention to
yeah.
leave, things kind of slowed down on the NASA front as we were handing off different things and transitioning. So
Nice.
it was I was ready to hit the ground running.
And you've already got the T-shirt. You've already got the branding already. Not missing
Yeah,
a trick.
Moon to Mars. We had a big festival and lots of people out to understand what we're doing, going back to the moon and onto Mars.
That sounds like a festival that I need to be at in the future. The Moon to Mars Festival sounds fun. Matt, what are we talking about today? We've brought Brady in. What's where are we going today? What rabbit hole are we
Well, let's
going
first
down?
let's first talk about getting a future event at Space Center in Houston.
Oh
That
yeah, that's a good.
let's get that.
That's a bit unfair though. You're putting him under pressure live on LinkedIn.
I'm not putting any pressure. I'm putting it into the universe. He happens to be present for that statement.
Yeah,
For those of us who enjoyed our time in Lego, of which there was two of us,
Yeah.
one of the things that we geeked out about was just like almost this like return back to our childhoods of sorts. And going to Lego
Yes.
was an incredible experience to kind of re-examine wonder. And to me, the Space Center in Houston would be another opportunity to do that selfishly. So jokes aside, we were circulating offline this great article from Microsoft a couple months back,
Yeah.
talking about their latest work trends, specifically some things that caught my eye. So they again surveyed tens of thousands of people, I think 31,000 people in 30 plus countries, and then analyzed trillions of Microsoft 365 productivity signals, along with data from LinkedIn. The beauty of being Microsoft is you have infinite amounts of data around work. And in releasing their report, their CEO and chairman, Satya Nadella, said that the new generation of AI will remove the drudgery of work and unleash creativity, that there's an enormous opportunity for AI powered tools to help alleviate what he calls digital debt, build AI aptitude, and empower new employees. That really stood out for me. I'm seeing an organization that's going to play a key role in the rolling out of artificial intelligence with OpenAI, among others. And I was just curious for the group, Brady first, Chris second, like what were your first thoughts in reading the article and maybe just that quote in particular?
Yeah, Matt, I think I really appreciate that bold statement and bold claim. Um, but my observation and experience with technology advances is you have to manage them. And so you've got to be really intentional about how you want to leverage AI. I would say from a NASA perspective, AI has been used on the technical front for a while. We had a lot of people may think, hey, self-driving cars were started by Tesla or Uber or some of these others. The technology for that was actually developed by NASA for the rovers we put on
Mm.
Mars nearly 20 years ago. The Spirit and Opportunity rovers actually used the AI technology for self-driving. And so NASA's been using AI for a while on big data. You know, we get a lot of data from satellites and particularly Earth observations, climate change. And so using AI technology to sift and sort that data has been big. I think we're going to have to just carefully navigate and be real intentional about the culture we want to build, particularly as HR professionals, and some of the standards we want to set as we leverage HR, or I'm sorry, as we leverage AI in our organization, because it has a lot of possibility, but technology, you either figure out how to manage it or it manages you or runs rampant.
Yeah, I love
Mr.
that.
Rainey.
I think for me, what stood out was the first point mentioned, Matt, in the article where they talk about digital debt and how it's costing us innovation. I think
Mm.
we've all experienced it now with the inflow of data, email, Slack, WhatsApp, Teams. We can keep going. It's too much. And one of the data points which stood out was 68% of people said they don't have enough uninterrupted time to focus during the workday, as well. It's almost like technology is great, but also it's like, how do you even turn off? Because there's this messages coming flying at you all different directions, and obviously they've mentioned during the research the effect that's having on innovation, on creativity. So I do think we need to be more intentional about how we use AI, how we use technology, because the whole idea of it is supposed to be freeing us up from all of those tasks, all of that admin, and using it that way so we can focus more time and energy on collaboration, innovation. And at the moment, I'm finding many organizations, and clearly the data saying that, I'm not finding a good balance of doing. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, they just want you to work faster. So there's this promise of AI being freeing up this time so we can all like get work-life
Yeah.
balance and rediscover ourselves and look within and build relationships. And it's actually like, okay, now you can work 10 times faster and you can do more asynchronous work. You know, Brady, I'm really interested in your perspective. Obviously, working at the organizations you've worked in, they're solving complex problems. And whether it's moving 1.3 million people through a single venue over the course of a calendar year, that's a huge undertaking in and of itself, or putting people into space, these are significant logistical challenges. Clearly, the organization would value people's ability to brainstorm, problem solve, and solve these complex problems. And then they also have technology, to your point, alongside of it. How have you seen it work really well in terms of organizations finding the balance between dedicating time to that team building, problem solving, brainstorming activity, but also having access to incredible technologies?
Yeah, I think that's a struggle for a lot of organizations to find that right balance. And I know a lot of us went through so significant challenges with the pandemic. We had a few projects on the NASA side that actually slipped their schedule because of the pandemic, and there was a lot of remote interaction, by the teams during that time. And what they found in some of the projects is that there's longer term concern about safety issues. The engineers and scientists are more willing to have hallway conversations or informal uh, concerns being raised kind of in that in-person setting. What we were finding is there were less of those kind of safety concerns being raised with formal teams meetings and formal meetings being set up. So we've got to figure out that balance. And with with AI and with the potential to kind of leverage the technology and the resources, there's a balance in kind of the human perspective being brought to bear. And I'll say my perspective is heavily shaped by kind of NASA's philosophy and approach to human space exploration. And that is robots and AI can really help us get there. We had the Mars rovers that I talked about earlier. We've got Robonaut, that's a robot that assists the crew aboard the International Space Station. That was actually developed in partnership with GM, where they were having manual dexterity issues on the assembly line. And they use Robonaut, but it's an assistant to the humans. You still want the humans to have their eyes on things. I still remember a benchmarking visit we made to Google 4 years ago, and Google's approach from an HR perspective was humans review resumes. And this was at a time when there were a lot of skill-based resume reviews and that sort of thing. So I think as an organization, you got to figure out what your culture is and what your approach to this technology is going to be, and how it assists and helps humans in the process.
Chris, I feel like I'm asking you a bunch of questions today, but let me ask you one more. One thing that you and I riff about a lot offline, and Brady can appreciate this, is there's just so much information. Like today, there's just so much information. Some of it's good.
Yeah.
Some of it's hilarious, and some of it's not factual. It's really hard nowadays to get information, whether it's using OpenAI for that matter and trusting its sources, or going to do a giant Google search to find information. Like it's difficult to find the relevant information. And then within an enterprise context, if I'm an employee and I'm trying to find out the organization's policy or practices or standards or the appropriate SOP to undertake an activity, it's really hard to find that information. It often relies upon informal communication networks. You mentioned Google, Brady. One of the things that stood out for me in the pandemic was that the individual people in the organization that struggled most moving to a remote were the people who'd been in the company the least amount of time. They didn't have those informal social networks. They didn't know, hey, if I need to have a question to solve, I can go to Brady for this, I can go to Chris for that. One of the big powers of potential for me for AI is just our ability to sift through large volumes of information to get the answer, to get the knowledge. And I know, Chris, for you, that's something that we're excited about going forward, is the potential for AI just to surface relevant insights, whether it's learning, whether it's policy orientation. I'm curious, was anything triggered for you in this conversation around that? As we think about AI being, to Brady's point, a bit of an assistant, what do you see as potential for organizations in terms of using this as a pathfinder, wayfinder to, the truth, for lack of a better term?
You mentioned a good set of the employee population that could really gain a lot of value from that. Those people that just join the organization. Because a lot of times in our days, I'm not as old as you both, but in our days, close, yeah. In our, you had a network, right? You could walk into the HR leader's office and ask a question. Now you don't have that. So I do see AI a good use case for AI and ChatGPT, etc., to be able to ask questions, get the answers that they need in a timely manner, in the flow of work when you need it, right? And I think that's important as well. The issue we're going to face, and we're already seeing it, right, is now about how do you bring this into organizations, the policies around it, the security around it. It's not as easy as we make it seem. One of the things that Matt and I are working on is creating knowledge vaults. So, creating knowledge vaults in your organizations that, you can still use the power of ChatGPT or generative AI, but it stores it in specific vaults in your organization, so it's not going to the external market or just to the internet in general. So many organizations, it's completely new, right? It's not like there's anyone in the leadership team that has experience with this. A lot of the things in the past we're like, this is so-and-so can help us. This is all new to everyone. So I do think that firstly, companies need to create a clear set of guidelines and principles around this, maybe create a sort of a council of leaders, both from the different parts of the business as well, not just from the top. I think that's important. as well, to get different perspectives. But I think the use case is definitely there, Matt, but also on the learning side, like we said, using generative AI as a way to upskill, reskill employees, but creating a custom pathway, learning pathway for each of those employees. We've never really been able to do that cost effective at scale, and I think that's something that AI can help us with as well. So many different things. It's exciting, but we really need to take a two-step, take it slowly. As well, because but also there are organizations that have already completely battened down the hatches and said don't go anywhere near it, and I don't think that's also the approach that you can take as well.
Yeah, let me pile onto that, Chris, because NASA has struggled since I joined the organization and even before with knowledge transfer. So human spaceflight programs in particular are 30 to 40-year programs and projects. So you had the space shuttle era that started in the people designing the shuttle were in the 1970s. Space station was 1980s, 1990s. And then now you've got the Artemis missions going back to the moon. And the way the human spaceflight programs work, you've got a development cycle. And then once you're flying, you've got the operation cycle. And what happens is each generation is responsible for different parts of the cycle. But then we're getting into this Artemis generation now that doesn't have a lot of people to rely on for the development life cycle that we did for station and for shuttle. I mean, there's very few people around, and so the power, like you said, that AI and some of these tools provide is that ability to do knowledge transfer, which will be critical to the future of of human spaceflight in particular, given these long lead times and the generational aspect of where you are. We had to focus a lot of time and energy on training leaders and training people on the different parts of that life cycle, because it is very different to manage a development program versus operations and when you're flying.
When I think about the stakes too, I mean, I've worked predominantly for retail organizations where, let's be honest, the stakes aren't that high. Like, oh no, the shelf is empty. Like, it's not the end of the world, but you're putting people outside of the stratosphere. That's a whole different level of risk threshold. It's not something where people, if they're looking for an answer, need to go thumbing through a manual for a couple hours to find it, and then they're going to bring it. Like, they have to either know, or somebody has to be very confident. And I'm sure there are checks and balances and checks upon balances to make sure things are done properly. I think in an era where not only is information more ubiquitous, and to your earlier point, Brady, knowledge transfer becomes more difficult and the rate of innovation becomes faster, we can't rely upon the sage person in the corner of the room who has 40 years of institutional knowledge to tell us the truth. We're going to need to know this, or know at least where to find the information. It actually harkens back, Chris, to a chat that I used to have when I was a CHRO, which was, I had HR business partners that would join the organization fresh out of college or university, lots of potential, like great people, lots of energy, lots of motivation. You're new, so you want to make a good impression. And yet at times would struggle to make the adaptation into an HR business partner role in particular, where they realized that their academic knowledge didn't get them very far, that their stakeholders, particularly in the retail format, didn't really care that you went to school at this particular university. How can you help me today with this particular problem? And they would often struggle to make the transition from school into the workforce. So I'd have to sit them down and say, okay, like, almost not forget everything you've learned, but understand that the most important thing in a corporate setting is how do you influence and work alongside individuals so that they trust you and that they take your advice and actually apply it. Otherwise, you become a very irritating encyclopedia that nobody wants to deal with. And I think this is the same thing where, whether it's artificial intelligence or knowledge transfer, we have to do so more, to your point, Chris, in the flow of work, which is when I need the answer, or I need the information, or I need the insight, I want it now. I can't keep 50 tabs open on my laptop to find it when I need to pull it. I have to be able to pull it at a moment's notice. And I think that's where, for me, it gets really, really exciting, is especially talk about knowledge vault. If you can assure the QA of the data and the integrity of the data, you really could create a repository where people can actually access the truth, and you could validate the truth against company standards, legislation, regulations, which is really important in industries like space and aerospace and transportation and the other sectors like resources where there's a real strong health and safety, environmental, social implication of the actions that are taken. So I think that's where I get really excited about the potential of the technology, is to help those folks bridge the gap, as it were. It gets really exciting in this space, but I'm mindful of your point, Chris. There's an ethical piece around AI as well. It's almost like every other article is like, AI is amazing, and then, oh my God, AI is moving too fast. And it's like, how do you find the balance? Brady, I'm curious. You've been steeped in the technology for longer than most of us. What are your overall thoughts on AI and the rate of adoption today as it relates to business and HR teams?
Yeah, that's a tough question for a government guy to answer, because
Right.
we tend to be slower to adopt and a little bit slower to move. Um, I think one of NASA's struggles too is going to be, and one of the things they've been wrestling with, is how do they get the knowledge that has been gained through human spaceflight and through frankly some tragedies. We lost a space shuttle in 1986 on launch. We lost a shuttle on entry in 2003, and a lot of new requirements were layered on. And there was a lot of concern in the NASA community that the new space industry and new companies, they're demonstrating great success so far, but what's going to happen the first accident that they have that costs human life? Because NASA has layered on different requirements as a result of that, and so I think one of NASA's struggles is, hey, how do they capture that knowledge and bundle that knowledge and make it accessible, um, to these new entrants and new companies, so we don't repeat the same lessons from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say that's a struggle. I don't know that I've got a good feel of the industry, just because being a government guy, the context is a little different. But certainly that's a need that's out there that NASA's got to wrestle with.
I think also that one of the reasons we need to slow down is AI in itself can also present its own set of risks. So before we do that, and this is something the our article talks about, every employee needs to have AI aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's great that you can have a prompt in there, but do you have the right analytical judgment? Let's just frame it that way to
Yeah.
understand, because it's just grabbing anything and everything. It doesn't mean it's the truth. We all access the internet. It doesn't mean what it's serving you is correct. So, and when it comes to space flight, you can't afford that. So I think it's important that we focus on, upskilling our employees, making sure they have that AI aptitude, and focusing on things like emotional intelligence, things like analytical judgment, things like intellectual curiosity, bias detection. Is another thing. There's going to be inherent built-in bias no matter what, as well, and also AI delegation prompts. Like that's a whole another set of skills. What do you even put into the system to get the right answers out? So before we get all fancy and excited about doing all of these things, we need to take a step back and make sure, because even I've realized that I don't really have the greatest analytical judgment when it comes to using generative AI. So I realized that's something I'm gonna have to develop, because, as you said, yes, we want to do the knowledge transfer, but when you add AI into the equation, you can't just rely on the reply. Does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah, Chris,
yeah.
Chris, and I'll just pile briefly onto that we were using from an HR perspective a Resumex tool that kind of did a skills assessment for a number of years, and we would always have to have people look at the results of what was the outcomes of their analysis, because some of our candidates would write, "I am willing to learn," and they would copy the job description. So of course they floated to the top of the Resumex list. So to your point, you need someone with eyes and with judgment of what is the tool providing.
Yeah. at least that you could see that they worked smart, not hard. They're like,
Right,
I wonder
right.
what keywords the AI is looking for. Let me copy and paste the resume back into the platform. I kind of respect that a little bit at the same time as well. It sounds like something I would do, and Matt would definitely do that. Listen, I can't believe half an hour went that quickly already, and I know you've got to run. But firstly, I want to say thank you for coming on. But secondly, congrats on the new role as well. We're definitely going to try and chase you down to have one of the events with you. Now Matt's brought out the idea, but in the meantime, where can people connect with you if you want to reach out and say hi?
Yeah, I'm out there on LinkedIn, so folks can connect with me there, and certainly Space Center Houston. I'm at bpyle@spacecenter.org.
Amazing! Oh wow, amazing! That's just having that email is cool. Just
It is cool.
what's your email address? Spacecenter.org. Okay, all right. That's a conversation starter. But listen, I appreciate you coming on, Matt. A pleasure as always. Thanks to everyone listening. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the share button on LinkedIn. Make sure you copy in colleagues. We really want to help as many people as possible. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye. See you later.
Bye all.